I stood on the stage, the award heavy in my hands, the spotlight blinding. I searched the front row for a familiar face. Empty seats stared back at me. My phone buzzed. A video autoplayed. My husband, my in-laws, all laughing around a birthday cake, the caption screaming, "Family over everything." My stomach twisted. I had invited them months ago. They had promised. The applause felt like static in my ears as my smile froze. That was the exact moment I realized. If I wanted to survive in this family, I couldn't just defend myself. I would have to own the game. The morning felt like the start of a long-awaited summer. Sunlight spilled through the bedroom curtains, warm and golden, brushing over the silk gown I had hung on the wardrobe door days ago. I had chosen it with care, soft ivory, fitted but not ostentatious, the kind of elegance that whispered rather than shouted. As I fastened the small pearl earrings and draped the sea blue silk scarf over my shoulders, I felt the weight of its history. My mother-in-law had given it to me 2 years ago on my first Christmas with the Carters. "To welcome you into the family," she had said. I had believed her. The driver arrived at 9. I rode in silence, hands resting in my lap, visualizing the moment I would walk onto that stage. My name had been printed on the program weeks in advance. Emily Carter, Brand Innovator of the Year. It was the kind of recognition I had fought for my entire career, the proof that every late night and every impossible pitch had been worth it. As the car pulled up to the Hilton ballroom, I caught sight of the red carpet rolled out front. Photographers loitered, adjusting lenses, waiting for the award winners to arrive. I inhaled deeply, holding on to the hope that somewhere behind those flashing cameras, my husband would be waiting with his easy smile and a bouquet of lilies. He had said he would be here. They all had. Inside, the ballroom shimmered with gold and crystal. Waiters in white gloves moved between tables, topping off champagne flutes. My eyes swept toward the front, where the rows marked VIP were draped in white linen, adorned with name cards. My heart stuttered. The seats assigned to the Carters were empty. 4 of them untouched, their place cards aligned with precision. I glanced at my phone. No missed calls, no messages. A voice from behind urged me toward the backstage area. I obeyed, forcing a smile as my heels clicked against the marble. When my name was called, the applause rose in waves. The spotlight found me. I stepped forward, the award cool against my palm, heavy with meaning. My smile stretched for the photographers, but my gaze drifted, searching again for a familiar face in the dark beyond the lights. All I saw were strangers. My scarf, warm against my neck moments ago, suddenly felt suffocating. I gave my speech. The words came automatically, lines I had rehearsed 100 times, but each sentence landed hollow in my chest. "Thank you to those who have supported me," I said, my voice steady even as something inside me fractured. When the applause ended, I walked off stage, the clapping fading into a dull hum, like static on a dead channel. The first thing I did was check my phone. A notification banner slid across the screen, Facebook Live. I tapped it. My screen filled with the sight of my husband standing beside his sister as she blew out the candles on an elaborate 3-tier cake. The room behind them was packed, laughter spilling over the microphone. A giant gold balloon arched above the crowd, letters spelling out, "Happy 40th." The caption, written in cheerful caps, read, "Celebrating the most important day of the year. Genta family over everything." It wasn't just that they had skipped my ceremony. It was that they had planned something else entirely, a rival event. They hadn't forgotten. They had replaced me. My chest tightened, but I kept watching. My mother-in-law leaned into the frame, raising a glass of champagne toward the camera. "To family," she said, her smile bright, the same smile she had worn when she first handed me the scarf now resting on my shoulders like a cruel joke. The guests cheered. My husband clapped his sister on the back, and I stood alone in a backstage hallway, the award still in my hand. I scrolled down. More clips, selfies with captions, "Best family ever." Group shots where my name was never mentioned. In one video, my husband was tagged. He had been online the entire time, never once sending me a word. The humiliation spread through me like ink in water, staining everything it touched. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a scheduling conflict. This was deliberate. They wanted me to feel small. They wanted to remind me that no matter what I achieved in my career, I would never be the center of their world. I took a deep breath, forcing the air through my lungs. The scarf slid slightly on my shoulder, the silk whispering against my skin. My fingers brushed over it, and for the first time, I saw it not as a gift, but as a mask, a symbol of an acceptance that had never been real. A young event coordinator approached me with a smile, asking if I'd like to join the winners for a group photo. I glanced toward the VIP seats one last time, those perfect empty chairs. Then I smiled because the truth had settled inside me with a strange, icy clarity. If this was family, I wanted out. And if they thought I would simply walk away wounded, they didn't know me at all. For 2 days after the award ceremony, I went silent. I didn't call, didn't text, didn't even post the official photos from the event. My husband tried once, half-heartedly, to ask how it went, in that distracted tone people use when they already know the answer. I smiled faintly, told him it was fine, and let the conversation die. The Carters, perhaps sensing my withdrawal, began their own damage control. A message from my mother-in-law popped up first. "We understand, dear. That night was just so busy with your sister-in-law's birthday. You know how important family is." Attached was a photo of them all, champagne glasses raised, grinning as if the world existed solely for their joy. My sister-in-law chimed in a few hours later. "You looked amazing in the live stream, Em. Sorry we couldn't be there, but you understand, right?" The text was accompanied by a picture of her mid-laugh, eyes glittering like she had just won something. I didn't respond. I didn't correct them. I let their words sit there, a collection of hollow pleasantries designed to rewrite the truth. They wanted to believe I was licking my wounds in silence, shrinking into the shadows. That belief was the first weapon I could use against them. On the third night, long after my husband had gone to bed, I sat in my home office, scrolling through financial reports on my laptop. The Carter family company, a heritage furniture manufacturer, had always been presented as a fortress, solid, unshakable. But tucked inside the quarterly reports was something I hadn't noticed before, a series of short-term loans stacked like precarious dominoes, each one taken out to cover the last. The most recent carried an interest rate so high it screamed desperation. It didn't take much digging to confirm my suspicion. They were in trouble, serious trouble. If the bank called in those loans, the company would fold within months. They'd lose not only their primary source of income, but the reputation they'd spent decades building. I sat back in my chair, letting the information settle. The public snub at my ceremony was cruel, but this was opportunity. The game had shifted. The next morning, I made a phone call I had been holding in reserve for years. His name was Richard Hale, a venture capitalist with a sharp mind and a memory like a locked vault. Years ago, the Carters had courted him for a lucrative expansion deal, until my sister-in-law decided he wasn't the right fit and humiliated him in front of the board. They'd burned that bridge so completely, I doubted they remembered it had ever existed. Richard answered on the second ring. "Emily Carter," he said, his tone laced with surprise and something colder. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "I have a proposition," I replied. "One that involves the Carter Company. And before you hang up, you should know it's not for them. It's for us." There was a pause, then a low chuckle. "Go on." We met that afternoon in a quiet corner of a hotel lounge, away from curious eyes. I laid out what I knew: the debt, the timelines, the vulnerability. Richard listened, fingers steepled beneath his chin, his expression unreadable. "And what exactly do you want from me?" he asked at last. "I want you to acquire the debt," I said, quietly, "through intermediaries. Then we structure a buyout they can't refuse or repay. When they realize who's behind it, it'll be too late." A slow smile spread across his face. "You do realize this would give me control over your husband's family's legacy. That's the point," I said evenly. Richard leaned back in his chair, studying me like a chess player sizing up an opponent who just revealed a dangerous opening move. "You've changed, Emily," he murmured. "Not changed," I corrected. "Just stopped pretending." We shook hands before parting, the terms left unspoken but understood. I walked out of the hotel into the bright afternoon, the city humming around me. For the first time since that night on the stage, my lungs filled with air that didn't feel heavy. As I crossed the street, my phone buzzed with another message from my sister-in-law. "Lunch this weekend. Let's catch up." I didn't bother to reply. I was already imagining the look on her face when she realized the debt collector she feared most was the woman she'd dismissed as weak. Let them think I was fading. Let them believe I was nursing my pride while they carried on, untouched. They'd never suspect that the first pieces of their empire had already been moved into position. The chessboard was mine now. 3 weeks after my meeting with Richard, the first phase of the plan unfolded in the most public way possible. I arrived at the Carter Company's downtown office for a board meeting, dressed in slate gray silk, carrying a leather portfolio that looked as if it held nothing more than presentation slides. Inside was a proposal, on paper, pitched as the company's lifeline. The boardroom was all polished mahogany and cold stairs. My husband sat 2 seats down, shifting uncomfortably as if he already sensed something beneath the surface. My sister-in-law smiled with that brittle politeness she saved for people she wanted to see fail. I began with the problem they couldn't deny. Declining sales, shrinking margins, the bank breathing down their necks. I presented a new market expansion, custom furniture lines for luxury hotels overseas. The hook was simple: high margins, fast contracts, guaranteed visibility. The catch was buried in the fine print, invisible unless you knew where to look. The expansion required an immediate infusion of capital from a private lender. I didn't mention that the lender was one of Richard's shell companies, or that every repayment term was designed to keep the Carter Company tied to that capital indefinitely. On paper, it was salvation. In reality, it was a velvet noose. As I spoke, I could see the board members leaning forward, eyes hungry. The plan sounded bold, visionary, exactly what they thought they needed. My sister-in-law asked a few pointed questions about control and oversight, but I answered smoothly, painting the picture of a family-led revival. My husband stayed silent, glancing between us like he was afraid to interrupt. When they voted to approve the deal, the decision was unanimous. I slid the contract across the table, watching as each signature flowed onto the page, like ink seeping into fabric. Every move they made tightened my grip. The weeks that followed were a quiet tightening of threads. Richard's capital began flowing into the company, funding projects that made the Carters look like visionaries again. They strutted through industry events, boasting about their turnaround strategy. And while they basked in their supposed victory, I started preparing Phase 2. It came sooner than expected. One Monday morning, a friend in PR called me, her voice tight. "Emily, you need to see this." She texted a link. I clicked and froze. It was a blog post already picking up traction, accusing me of siphoning money from a charity fundraiser I'd chaired the previous year. The author claimed anonymous sources had confirmed I'd taken a consulting fee that was never disclosed. The story included a blurry photo of me at the event, holding an envelope. I didn't need to guess where it came from. The tone, the timing, it reeked of my sister-in-law. This was her style. Attack reputation first, destroy credibility, then watch the target crumble under public judgment. But this time, I was ready. I went to my desk, opened a folder labeled Archive, and found the file I'd been saving. Months earlier, while helping with wedding preparations for a cousin, I'd reviewed security footage from a reception hall the Carters used frequently. In one clip, my sister-in-law was caught slipping into the staff office, rifling through drawers. She emerged with a white envelope, later confirmed to be the cash portion of the wedding gifts. That money had never been accounted for, and rumors whispered through the family said it vanished into her gambling debts. I sent the clip to a trusted contact at a popular investigative podcast. They had a reputation for thorough fact-checking and a massive audience. By Wednesday, the episode dropped. They didn't name her outright, but the unnamed family member of a prominent business dynasty was identifiable to anyone who knew the Carters. Screenshots of the footage began circulating on Twitter. Someone inevitably connected it to her Instagram photos from that night. Same dress, same hair. By Thursday morning, the hashtag #BrarPerfectDaughterNoMore was trending nationally. News outlets picked it up, framing it as a story of hypocrisy and hidden scandal. The comment section was brutal. She tried to fight back, posting a tearful video denying everything, claiming the footage was taken out of context. But the internet is merciless. Side-by-side memes appeared, pairing her denial with the clear image of her slipping the envelope into her clutch. I didn't have to say a word. The board called an emergency meeting to discuss public image. My sister-in-law attended via video call, her voice hoarse, her hair unstyled. The pity in their eyes was real, but so was the fear. Investors don't like scandal, and this one had teeth. I sat in my office that night, the city lights reflecting in the window. My phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "She's finished. Your move." And the internet never forgets. The boardroom felt different now. The tension that had once hovered over my presence had shifted. Wariness replaced with quiet deference. My sister-in-law was absent, officially on leave, while the scandal cooled, but her chair sat empty like a warning. I stood at the head of the table, the city skyline behind me, and clicked to the first slide of my presentation. "This," I began, "is how we take Carter & Cubber global." The plan was bold, even by my standards. A complete rebrand, targeted partnerships with luxury hotel chains in Europe and Asia, and a manufacturing deal with a conglomerate the Carters had tried and failed to court for years. I spoke of new markets, international recognition, and prestige that would eclipse their competitors. The room leaned in with every word, but I didn't mention the quiet conversations I'd already had, how those contracts were secured because of my network, my reputation, not theirs. Halfway through the meeting, the conference room door opened and in walked Daniel Cross, CEO of the very conglomerate that had eluded them. His presence alone was a statement. We shook hands, exchanged pleasantries, and then I let him announce that our partnership agreement had already been signed. Gasps rippled around the table. My husband's brows knitted in confusion, as if he couldn't piece together how this had happened without him knowing. When the applause finally faded, Daniel handed me a thick envelope. "And as part of this collaboration," he said, "we've also acquired a 10% stake in Carter & Co. That stake, by mutual agreement, will have its voting rights assigned to Emily Carter." Heads turned toward me. The largest independent stake in the company, transferred without warning. The true impact didn't register for them immediately, but I saw the recognition bloom in a few sharp eyes. Without knowing, they'd crowned me queen. I didn't savor it openly. I thanked Daniel, kept my expression poised, and moved on to the next slide. But beneath the calm exterior, every muscle in my body hummed with the knowledge that the foundation had shifted. The following week brought the second phase, the coup they would never see coming. It began with a stack of documents my husband signed without hesitation. We were in the kitchen, him half distracted by a late-night call about a supplier issue. I placed the papers before him with a pen, saying, "Just routine, legal housekeeping so I can sign off on a few overseas contracts while you're traveling." He flipped through, eyes skimming the legal jargon, and scrawled his name at the bottom of each page. What he didn't notice was the clause buried on page 7, transferring his authority as company representative to me until revoked in writing by mutual consent. Without mutual consent, there was no going back. The signatures were notarized the next morning. By the time anyone realized what it meant, The power had already shifted. I now held his seat's voting rights along with my own and Daniel's. That combination made me the controlling voice in every major decision. The moment of realization came 2 weeks later at a board meeting when a vote on a major budget shift ended in my favor by a narrow margin. My husband frowned at the tally, then glanced at me. "Wait," he said slowly. "That's my vote." "It's delegated to me," I replied evenly, sliding a copy of the signed authorization toward him. His hand froze halfway to the paper. My sister-in-law, attending via video feed, read the document aloud in a tight, incredulous voice. The room went silent. "You tricked me," my husband whispered. I tilted my head. "No, I gave you exactly what you wanted. Less paperwork." The silence broke into a flurry of whispered arguments, but the math was undeniable. Between Daniel's stake, my own shares, and my husband's transferred rights, I controlled the majority. No decision could pass without my approval. The Carter family, for all their posturing and politics, had effectively removed themselves from the driver's seat, and they'd done it with their own signatures. They lost without a fight. The office felt quieter now. Decisions were made faster, projects approved without the endless debates that had once defined Carter & Co. I had the authority, the control, the respect, or at least the grudging compliance of everyone in the room. Yet every morning when I walked past the glass wall of the boardroom and saw my reflection, the satisfaction I expected wasn't there. One afternoon, as I reviewed a contract in my office, Lisa, my most trusted operations manager, stepped in. She set a stack of signed invoices on my desk, then hesitated. "We won," she said softly. "But you're not smiling." I looked up from the papers. "It's not about smiling." "Then what is it about?" she pressed. I didn't answer. How could I explain that the victory felt hollow, that every strategic move, every calculated win had left something raw and unsteady inside me? I'd set out to teach them a lesson, to force them to respect me. But somewhere along the way, the line between justice and vengeance had blurred. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the balcony, the city glittering beneath me. The wind tugged at my hair, and I thought of the first day I had worn the blue scarf, how it had made me feel like I belonged. Now, belonging felt irrelevant. Power had replaced it, but power was cold company. Have I become them? The answer didn't have time to form before the first blow landed. It came in the form of an email from the Financial Herald, a major business news outlet. The subject line read, "Request for comment on allegations of market manipulation." I opened it and froze. Attached was a PDF of leaked documents, internal memos, email chains, even a spreadsheet that painted me as the architect of a deliberate scheme to manipulate furniture market prices through our new overseas contracts. The memos were real, but doctored. Small edits, twisted phrasing, selective omissions, enough to make it look like my goal was not growth, but sabotage. I immediately called Richard, certain he would have heard whispers. His tone was clipped. "I've seen it. It's already circulating in investor circles. This could trigger a formal inquiry." "Who?" I demanded. "Who would have access to those files?" The answer came the next day when a news blog published an exclusive interview with my sister-in-law. She didn't name me directly, but her insinuations were surgical. References to a certain family member using insider connections, veiled hints about shady partnerships. Her eyes in the accompanying photo were alight with triumph. But she wasn't working alone. The article credited its source for the leaked documents, an anonymous insider, formerly a close ally of Emily Carter. My stomach dropped as I read the description. Background in finance, previous involvement in expansion deals. There was only one person it could be. When I confronted him, he didn't bother denying it. We met in the lounge of the same hotel where we'd first discussed strategy months ago. "Why?" I asked, my voice low. He leaned back, his expression a mix of regret and defiance. "Because you stopped being the woman I knew." I stared at him. struggling to reconcile the man before me with the one who had once whispered promises over wine, who had told me I was the smartest person in any room. You were supposed to be on my side. I was, he said, until I realized you weren't just out to beat them. You wanted to burn it all down. He took a sip of his drink. Your sister-in-law offered me a chance to stop you before you crossed a line you couldn't come back from. I almost laughed, the sound sharp and humorless. So you teamed up with her? The one person who would set fire to everything just to watch it burn? His gaze didn't waver. Better her than you. The words hit harder than I expected. I had built walls against the Carters, anticipating every attack, but I hadn't guarded against him. He'd seen the map of my moves, the weaknesses I never showed anyone, and he'd used them. The deepest cut always comes from inside. The scandal didn't destroy me, but it made something inside me snap into clarity. For weeks, I fought the allegations with lawyers, statements, and numbers that proved my innocence, but each victory felt more exhausting than the last. I had spent years maneuvering through battles with the Carters, but this wasn't a battle anymore. It was a war with no finish line, no moment of peace. Late one evening, I sat alone in the boardroom, the city lights spilling across the table where countless arguments had played out. My reflection in the glass looked older, sharper, and far more tired than the woman who had first walked in here. My phone buzzed with an update from Richard. A foreign investment group was offering to buy Carter & Cobb for a record-breaking sum. It was the kind of deal most people in this industry dreamed of their entire lives. And if I signed, I could walk away. I stared at the contract for a long time. Walking away would mean giving up control, the seat at the table I had fought so viciously to claim. But it would also mean no more schemes, no more late-night counterattacks, no more pretending that the family's approval still mattered to me. When I called the lawyers the next morning, my voice didn't waver. We arranged the sale within weeks. The investors were eager, the Carters too stunned to mount a serious objection. By the time the ink dried, the company was no longer ours. I had negotiated one condition into the deal. A portion of the sale proceeds would be used to establish a scholarship fund in my name, independent of the Carter legacy. It was mine, untouchable, untainted. The day I signed the final papers, I walked out of the building without looking back. My heels clicked against the marble, echoing in the quiet lobby. Outside, the spring air was cool and clean, and for the first time in years, I felt weightless. Some empires are meant to be left behind. The months that followed were a strange kind of calm. I poured myself into the scholarship program, building partnerships with universities, setting criteria to help students who, like me once, had ambition but no safety net. The work felt different from the company. It didn't drain me, didn't demand constant defense. Every choice was mine alone, and every result was tangible. When the day came for the first scholarship awards, the auditorium was filled with students and their families. The air buzzed with anticipation. Banners with the foundation's name hung from the rafters, and the stage was set with rows of chairs for the recipients. I stood at the podium, looking out at a sea of young faces, some bright with excitement, others shy but determined. This program isn't just about funding education, I told them. It's about opening doors you didn't know existed and walking through them even when someone tries to close them in your face. The applause rose like a wave. I began calling the students up one by one, shaking their hands, posing for photos, and then, in the periphery, I saw them. The Carters. My husband, my sister-in-law, my mother-in-law, all dressed to perfection, hovering near the side aisle. They hadn't been invited, but I wasn't surprised they came. They smiled for the photographers, trying to angle themselves into the coverage. During the final group photo, they stepped forward. My mother-in-law whispered, "Let's take one together, Emily, for the press. It'll be good for the foundation." I looked at them, their perfect masks back in place, as if nothing had happened, as if years of betrayal could be erased with one staged image. The photographers were already adjusting their lenses, sensing the shot would be valuable. I smiled. Genuinely, but not for them. Turning slightly, I stepped down from the stage instead. The camera flashes followed me as I crossed to the front row, where a girl in a simple cotton dress sat clutching the award envelope like it was a lifeline. She couldn't have been more than 18. "Come on," I said softly, offering her my hand. She looked up, startled, then smiled and took it. Together, we walked back up the steps, ignoring the murmurs behind us. I placed her beside me for the final photo, my arm around her shoulders. In that moment, the Carters faded into the background, their presence irrelevant. The applause was for the students, for the future, not for them. And as the shutter clicked, freezing the moment in time, I realized I didn't need to win against them anymore. I had already left them behind. This is my family now.